So I'm going to talk about Scrum today, and I have my Scrum jersey on in a distributed context. How many of you are working with Scrum and people in different locations? All of you, almost. Keep your hands up. If you think that this will increase, you still have more distribution, still have people in different locations, then keep your hand up. Yeah, more or less the same. If we look into how the trends regarding distributed, maybe about outsourcing, KPMG made a large research last year, talking with companies in Denmark, Norway, Sweden, Finland, and companies working with IT, and more than 50% of the companies expected that they will do more outsourcing work during the next year. So this is something that is increasing. Also, this research showed that the #1 reason for working distributed and working with outsourcing was on the cost side, to reduce cost. But also, there was some indicators that quality, technical skills were also coming in. So it was not just for the cost side, but also actually be able to have better technical skills and have better quality. But also the flexibility. A lot of companies are looking into this. Can we turn on off the resources? I have doubt, at least in IT, that this can happen. But those are the trends, especially for new companies, more mature companies, they're looking into the cost side, and more mature companies in outsourcing are looking into the rest of it. Also, 50% of the companies actually said that they did not have enough skills in governance to manage the outsourcing setup. This was a problem for many of them. Then the governance area is a big area. How do we do governance? How do we control it? Or how do we manage it? Well, distributed work is not only outsourcing, but there's a lot of work coming out of outsourcing that creates distributed teams. About me, I'm a father, I have 2 kids. We are not distributed, we are living in the same place, even though many of the families around us are actually being distributed. I work as an agile coach and trainer, working with companies in Denmark. Many of them have teams in different countries. And my own experience working with Scrum and Agile has been for more than 10 years. Not as a consultant, but actually working inside companies, working with teams for a longer time. I do also training from Scrum.org in Scrum, and also management trio training, which actually has a lot of areas that can be used when working with distributed teams. So let's look at the agile part and working with distributed. This track is called something about Beyond the Agile Manifesto. But you can ask yourself, when working with Agile, is it actually more becoming focused on processes and tools than actually the individuals and how they're working together, how they're interacting? Or the documentation part, is this part actually increasing instead of having more focus on actually delivering something? The contract agreement, is that actually starting to become a lot more focused in this area, rather than actually having collaboration between different teams? And also the plan part, this is actually more focusing on the plan and the deliverables and the commitment and what we actually expected, rather than actually be able to handle the change that will occur. My experience with distributed teams is that it often gets away from at least the Agile Manifesto, and we tend to forget some of the areas in that. If you look at Scrum in a distributed context, then often Scrum is actually being used to control the work. What we often forget, and what actually can make Scrum much more valuable in a distributed setup, is also that we need to remember that Scrum and Agile is very good of managing complex work. There's some uncertainty. So the complex part is not just make the work, it's not just that the work actually being more simple when we make it distributed, it's still complicated or complex. And we have complex work, we need to manage this in an empirical way. We still need to do inspect and adapt, make things transparent, does not disappear by magic, by moving it into a distributed setup. So the inspect and adapt is key area, and the global transparency, that's a hard one. It's very, very hard to do. And then some of the underlying principles, the bottom-up intelligence, not trying to separate the work and the decisions and how to do the work, and also the self-organization, that's often actually being moved away when working distributed. So those areas are important to have as a mindset for actually working with Scrum in a distributed setup and get much more value out of it. I'm going to talk about some patterns that I have been working with for almost 10 years in different setups. So those are not theoretical things that I have been inventing in different ways. Those have been experienced working with teams between Denmark and many different locations. But let's just define a pattern. So a pattern is a solution to a problem in a context. So the context part is key. It's a solution, it's a problem, but this is still the context. So it's not a silver bullet. It's not a magic formula. Just put it in, do all the things, and then let it work. It still needs to be put into a context. When several patterns are being described in one area, they form a pattern language. So those actually be seen as a whole. There's some relation between those. And also a pattern is never done. Some of those patterns I've been working with for I think 8 years. So a pattern is still being improved and it's never done. Based on working with teams for about 8 years in Denmark, Eastern Europe, Asia, a lot of work in India, northern part, middle part, southern part, a lot of work with Ukraine, Bangladesh. I have seen some patterns for what needs to be in place for Scrum to work and work better. And what are the common problems that actually will prevent the results. I do have a paper about the Bangladeshi setup available on lineagile.dk. It's a paper that was presented at the Agile 2009 conference in Chicago. So let's look at those patterns. So the 9 patterns forms a system. So it's not just to say, we'll just do one of those. They are all interrelated, and they all need to be balanced. And what I have seen working with the teams in different companies, working on all the different patterns will actually make the structure and the system for Scrum to be much more valuable between different locations. So the first one, the global gardener. The global gardener is one to look at the whole system, to focus on growing the system, see this as a system, not just as some deliverables. We need to have some projects delivered, or we need to have some releases, or we need to have this deadline, and we need to do this. So someone to actually look into the whole global system. Focusing on the impediments that's actually on the global setup. Not from one team specific, but from the whole setup of teams. The first couple of years that I worked with those different patterns, I didn't realize that it was necessary until I actually figured out that when I worked in companies, this was very often what I did. I was not part of a specific project or part of a specific release of a product. I more or less worked across different teams and across the organizations. And there's a lot of impediments working with a global setup, especially if there's 40 people in one location and 50 in another locations, and it's a huge organizational infrastructure around it. So the global impediments, and also actually balancing the short term and long term. It's not just delivering next week or next month, it's also where we're actually going with this setup. A good thing to do here is also to do Gemba travel. So Gemba is a Japanese word for workplace where value is added. So where people are actually doing actual work. So as a global gardener, I'm actually traveling to different teams and different locations and see how things are actually working. Not just to deliver a project, but actually to look into the whole system. On the picture, it's two nice people, Carsten and Pernille. Carsten has actually been working as a global gardener in one company that I've been working with, and he's been working on the whole system, not specific projects. And when he left the company recently, some of the areas, some of the other patterns started to vanish, started to disappear, because there was not this overall focus anymore. It was more sub-optimizing specific areas. So the global gardener is to have things getting closer together. And one important question for you to link to is say, do we actually have someone doing that? And if you don't, then how could this actually help you? Another area is the value stream structure. So not having a structure based on hierarchies, different roles just being mapped together. I've seen this in many large companies. We have one location, and a lot of different roles, and another location, and different roles. We're just mapping the roles together, and then we have an escalation structure where we need to fit work into. So having a setup more across different products, or domains, or customers, where we don't have all different kind of roles and hierarchies in between, but trying to look into how do we actually deliver work. So creating this value stream-oriented structure can be a huge benefit. It's moving away from the resource juggling part, the very high focus on cost, to say that we need to have a structure that will deliver our work, our projects, instead of just having resources we can put in and out. There's a lot of focus on having cost reduction and having a lot of utilization of people. So this is more about how do we actually build a structure that will deliver higher value and have a long-term, stable, distributed teams. Some of the extremely well-working, effective streams that I know have been working together for 1, 2, 3, 4 years. I've been with a team that have people been working together in a team for 6, 7 years in Asia. What I often see is that when people are allowed to work together in teams for a longer time, they don't focus that much on their individual career path and where are we going next. So actually creating the system and the structure, and this is a very important role for the global gardener to grow and be able to manage this total structure. Aligned written. So having this written not just in one location, but actually across different locations. Not just throwing things out to some other teams, getting some delivery dates back again, but actually creating the written where work is going to be integrated, where refinement of requirement and how we're working together is going to happen. Those snapshots, those integration points is very important, and especially when many teams are working together. So if you don't have this very aligned, written across teams and organizations, this is a key area. It creates a heartbeat. It creates a heartbeat for the organization. It creates a heartbeat for the distributed teams. A distributed team is very often far away from the rest of the organization. So also the communication part, what happens when we are here at the local site, might not go out to the remote site. There's actually a picture here with a team in Bangladesh 8 years ago. They had a board at the wall, trying to manage all the flow into the team. This board actually became the main driver for starting to work in an agile way, even in a country that did not know anything about agile at that point. Also, the other picture shows a larger release event in one company. Remote teams in this area were actually on big screens, and it brought everyone together, and the information flowed not just in the local side, but actually across the whole company. So make sure that there's a rhythm of communicating and also about the work we're doing is a key area. An important question to ask yourself is, how much are we actually doing in this area? Very often it's not done without someone to look at the whole system. We're not having the global gardener. Global transparency. That's another difficult one. So look into what we're doing, but also how we're doing it. How we're doing the work, how we're actually implementing the work. Not working with huge documents sent out to remote teams, but having this team backlog. Having this backlog for the teams. I have been working with so many teams that have a backlog for the main work they're doing. And then they have a lot of local individual backlogs for all the rest. So make sure that what we're doing is transparent, not just for the project or for the release, but also for everything we're doing. A good practice here is to have sneak previews, especially when working with remote teams. Instead of having them isolated for a sprint and show what they're doing at the end of the sprint review, actually build in a mechanism to have sneak preview and get this feedback, which is much more difficult to do if you're in different locations. To use a sneak preview practice to actually get the feedback into the sprint instead of having it at the end of the sprint. Also, how we're actually completing work. So the completeness, what's into completing work, having a global definition of done. I worked with a team last week, and this product owner had some challenges of getting results, getting deliverables from a team that they actually included a lot of errors, a lot of misunderstanding. And he realized that it was not clear how to complete the work. So actually just be going to see how do we complete work, what do we mean about completeness, not in one location, but actually across locations is a key area to look into. So the transparency is very important to make a global setup actually working well. There are some pictures here of teams having on the one on the top, look into a shared backlog. This is what we're doing right now, using a tool to visualize it, make it transparent. And on the bottom, actually having a larger review, a lot of different stakeholders to give feedback. It's so important, especially for different distributed teams, to get this feedback. Otherwise, you can just go into a completely wrong direction. So build up the global transparency and have a lot of focus on it to make it more and more transparent is a key area here. And again, this is something that is very often done isolated, sub-optimized. If not, someone is actually looking across the whole organization. So the global gardener here is also key to really get this to work. Shared infrastructure. We just need this delivered, but how do we actually do it? Many organizations are working with distributed teams, having their own separate infrastructure, and then try to to integrate it. That creates a lot of challenges. So have this really shared infrastructure that is available from all locations is a key to get this tool to grow even more. It's not just that we're doing some work here and then we have to put it into another infrastructure. So never, if you are in one location, you just log in and you can do the same as you are in another location. More and more companies are actually using remote access, so you can work the same way if you're working from Ukraine or from India as you are in a Danish office. The picture up here shows a product owner. This is actually taken from Kiev, from some teams in Kiev. Product owner talking with the teams using this interconnected infrastructure, all being integrated together. A good practice is actually to have people to work in another location. So having a developer or tester to work with a team in another location often uncovers a lot of challenges. I've seen a number of times that Danish developers are trying to spend a week. Very often you cannot have a Danish developer to spend more than a week in a remote location, but to spend a week in India or in Ukraine working together with the teams, and very often they said, this is so slow, or this cannot be the way to do it. That creates a lot of improvements. So having people to actually work in different locations can also improve the infrastructure quite a lot. So investing into that area is the key. Automation, of course, is important, but enough automation. Look for the manual work, look for the change, and also you need to define what is automation. But across the world, there's a different opinion of what is actually automation. The infrastructure needs also to have some local ownership. So when working with teams in another location, in another country, needs to be someone in that location to have ownership of the infrastructure. There needs to be a plan B when things are not working, because that will happen. So how do we actually manage this situation where the main connection, the main integration part is not working? So having a plan B for the infrastructure is key to have here. So the question here is, how much is your infrastructure actually supporting this, and what can we do to improve it and still keep the balance between all the different areas? The practice snapshot. So getting into the situation where we don't have a toolbox of local practices understood in one way for one team in one location, and another toolbox of local practices understood in another way for another team in another location. But creating this shared toolbox and find out where are we right now, what are the gaps, what are the needs for training, mentoring, coaching. Use cumulative practice across different locations is a very good practice to do. In this picture, there are some testers meeting every second week to discuss different test practices and get an alignment and grow this area across different teams. I meet with a group of Scrum Masters every second week, 3 from teams in Ukraine and 4 from teams in Denmark, and we actually are growing the Scrum Master practices and do sharing across different teams. So have this community of practice where people meet across teams can actually grow the practices and creating a snapshot of it. So where are we now and where are we going? It's key to actually move the whole system. What do we mean about check-in? I met teams that we think about, check-in, that is source control and Git and TFS and etc. But also have met teams that said, check-in, that's just how often we save our work. So get a shared understanding of what do we put into those words. What do we mean about testing? I work with teams, agile teams, that the testing is just what we do at the end or in the second sprint. So as you see, how do we do testing in a sprint? How do we do testing that actually enable us to use Scrum much better? What do we do with user stories? For distributed teams, that is an area that very often is not used good enough. Some teams think user stories, we just read them and we ask questions if we don't understand it. Instead of saying user stories is something that we discuss and we actually are understanding it together. This picture will check in before you go home was actually from a team in Asia, I think 5-6 years ago. And they put up different notes in the team room for what they need to remember as a team to grow their different practices. There are some challenges that did not check in, so actually put up those small notes to help them. Requirements and iterate requirements. So how do we actually make requirements work well in a distributed setup? So iterate is not only to understand it, but also to implement it. If we work in an agile way, it's not just big bang solutions, but we need to iterate the understanding of the requirement. It is complex work. There are some uncertainty. We need to find out what's actually related to the work, not just deliver it as simple, predictable work. Going away from just handing over requirements, asking, do you have any questions, into a situation where you actually find out what's in this area. Quite a lot of facilitation from Scrum Masters, product owners to acknowledge that working distributed requires some more. So understand that what's in this area might not be as simple as I think it is. Needs to be a good balance between using videos, using remote setup, and having face-to-face meetings. There's a need for face-to-face meetings. As a rule of thumb, I say every time we have a new project or a new release, new team working together, there's a need to do some face-to-face meeting. Either the product owner flying out to the team, or the team getting together in one location with the product owner, or maybe the customer. There needs to be a balance, and the investment in this area is so small compared to the misunderstanding that can happen later on. The refinement part. So actually refining what we're doing is also something that is not used that much in distributed setup. So having regular refinement, what previously was called grooming, to actually make things small enough to fit into the sprint, but also to actually grow the understanding and the knowledge about it. And then make sure that people actually know where they're working. What is the vision? What are the goals? In the picture, there's one global team with team members from different locations actually being together and working on a larger workshop, understanding a project. Then they worked for a sprint together, and then they moved apart and did all the rest of the work in different locations. Validate domain knowledge is another key area that needs to be in place. And also another area that how do we actually make sure that we validate the domain knowledge necessary in the work that we are doing? If you look at knowledge, then you can separate it into the knowledge that you know. This is what you're using on a daily basis. Then the knowledge that you don't know. So you are aware of this is something that you're missing, but you can get some more information about it if you need. And then there's a big area of the knowledge that you don't know. That's the dangerous part. Because when you make decisions, you base it on your knowledge that you know, or you don't know, and then you can get some more information about it, maybe make a spike, or do some research. But the knowledge that you don't know. Ooh. So, from a product owner perspective, it's a key area not just to hand over the information and ask for questions, but talk about all the obvious things, all the things that actually this is just the way we do it here. I've seen so many products, releases being made on the understanding of some local situation instead of the understanding of how are we actually doing it in another domain. So building up the domain knowledge is a key area to make the right decisions. A good practice is to make small validation loops, not just do the handover, but actually also having a validation loop of, see, this is how I see it, and put some more context around it. Not only focus on the solution and how to do it, but also look into the problem, what are we actually going to do, and also the need behind it. Make sure that this is actually built into the process and how we do the work. And if they don't do it, then there's a lot of opportunities to have much more effective and good decision if you start doing it. There's a lot of good practices, innovation games. I actually read the innovation game book on our way to Asia, I think a week or two after it was published. I was working as a product owner at that time, and it changed completely how we did the workshop in Asia. I used a lot of the exercises to engage the team and to discover different things, and that made a huge difference. Also, game storming. There's a lot of good workshop exercises, specification by example, using ways to discover the boundaries and the domain. And also user story mapping is a good way to actually get an understanding of a complete product of release. The picture here is with a team from Ukraine, the business owner in Denmark, discovering for a new product, what are we actually going to do here? We can just see a snapshot of the wall, but there was actually a huge wall with a lot of post-it notes describing the intention of the system. So, another question here, how do we make sure that we have good shared domain knowledge across different locations? Who's actually doing it? The global culture. So how do we create this culture across different sites? It's not just about we need to have our culture in our location, but how do we actually work with that? This is also how do we work, how do we do work here? How do we complete work? How do we work together? The team storming, with the forming and storming and norming and performing, that also relates to distributed teams. It does not just disappear by magic by working distributed. Still need to have teams working together. Nevertheless, if there's only in one location and working together with a product owner, a business in another location, or there have team members in different locations, very often we don't see the challenges in the team dynamic because it's not transparent. It's getting lost in the distributed setup, getting lost in webcams and documents and etc. So, how do we actually form a team? I have a good practice that said, form local, work global. Every time there's a new team to be formed, new team to work together, get them together, know about each other. At the picture on the right here, there's a team actually doing a lot of exercises to know each other before they are starting to work from different locations. This is not just we have some resources here and some resources here, and we just put them together. Scrum does not help in that area. We still need to do team forming and still need to handle the team dynamic. Let's get away from the us and them culture and also understand what is actually the other culture, the country culture. First time I interviewed people in Asia, every time I said something, the other person did this. I was thinking, does this guy actually think that I'm wrong, or does he not agree? Until I realized that this was a way to actually acknowledge that I'm listening. I'm listening to you. So understand what are the common things to do in another culture? How do we talk to each other? I worked with a manager a while ago that had a lot of humor, a lot of ironic way of saying things. And when he worked with teams in India, there was a lot of clashes. Because he said something that he did not meant, and the team in India were just listening and thought this was serious. So it created a lot of confusion and a lot of problems. So know what is actually the common things of behavior in different countries. Also create a culture where focus on business value. Not just use Scrum as a way to deliver something faster, some predictable work, but actually create a focus on why we're doing this. The users, the customer is not the one to receive it. It's not the product owner, but there are actually some real customers. Very effective to visit customers, because that will make the team to much better self-organize. That will make the team much better use the bottom-up intelligence, build up the domain knowledge, build up the knowledge about who's actually using our work. And this needs to be an area that is also being prioritized. Also a culture on continuous improvement. This is not just deliver work faster and faster and faster. This is also to say, something is not working well here. And this is actually important for us to be able to improve that, and also to have some techniques and tools to do it. How do we do really good improvement process works? There's another picture here with a team in Ukraine working with their main problems currently. They've got some tools to look at this in a structured way, and they identified different things to try out. So that's a key area also to look into. So those patterns, those 9 patterns, that forms a structure that actually say, this is important to keep a balance. It's not just to do in one area, and then the rest is actually just flowing on the top, but this is something that needs to be handled and balanced. So if only look into how we deliver the work, and not work into how are we actually having the whole system intact, then we will not get that much value out of it. For the companies that I have been working with, when things are not working ideally, things are getting into some problems, then very often some of those areas are not working well. So I have used this as a way to do a full snapshot of the organization I'm working in, or the structure I'm working in, and see where are we good and where are we weak, and what can we do to improve the different areas. So one big question, an important question for you is to say, when we are working with distributed Scrum, are we actually working to do it much more efficiency, having much higher, faster solutions? Are we trying to have higher utilization? Very often that creates some more tunnel deliveries. We're just working faster in this area, and we're getting better and better at doing it, better and better of maybe doing the wrong thing. Instead of using Scrum in a way to actually find out, is this the right thing to do? So the distributed Scrum is not just about deliver things faster, but also about doing it more effective. Do we create value? Do we use the sprints to actually find out, are we on the right direction? To build in feedback? Do we have a system that actually will allow people to do that? Or we just need to follow the plan and follow the expected milestones because we already promised that? So manage the work in a way where we actually can maximize value, maximize the business value. When structures, organization are focusing more on the effective part, more on actually delivering value, then I have seen Scrum teams across different locations really take off. Really start to work together as teams that create value, that really start to question the obvious, really start to find new ways of doing things, even though they're working from different locations across the world. Starting to work really good together for a longer time, and actually creating amazing things. Also the risk part. There's a lot of risk by just following the plan, not knowing when to stop, but actually saying, now we've done this, what have we done right now? We need to change direction, not just follow the already scheduled plan. So those patterns can create a system where Scrum can work much better in a distributed setup. Not based off a lot of theory, based on practical experience. So questions for you could be, what are we doing right now? Are we actually managing the work, or are we actually trying to make it much more efficient? Or are we actually using Scrum as a way to maximize the value and also the potential that are in the different teams? And look at the whole pattern language here as a way to move it up as a whole and not just as small areas. Make sure that you ask yourself, what do we do in this area? Do we do anything? Why don't we do it? I hope I have given you some thoughts, some ideas. I've not been talking about very Scrum specific product owner, Scrum Master, how do we work in a sprint, how to do retrospective, but more what are the systems that will enable Scrum to be better used in a distributed setup. So ask yourself some of the questions. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mads. I think we have 5 minutes for questions, so I've been reading some of them coming in from your mobiles, and one of them is, how do you motivate and enable people in a more hierarchical-oriented cultures like Bangladesh to be more proactive in asking questions when they don't understand them?
So how do you enable people to be more proactive? Well, in Bangladesh, in that case, we actually hired people with a mindset of asking a lot of questions. So already from the beginning, part of the job interview was having people up to a whiteboard, discussing what have they been working on recently. That was at least the initial part. Also, we did a lot of training on how to work in an agile team. We did a lot of focus on actually creating the structures around the team. did not happen just like this, but it was something that actually grew over time. So, and we said this was important to do. We had some Scrum Masters from Denmark to facilitate and help building up Scrum Master roles in Bangladesh. I think those are some of the key areas. I've seen the same in India, Pakistan, in Eastern Europe.
I think you said when you talk, get away from them and us. And then the question is, if the culture is very different, isn't it important to talk about the difference between them and us?
Yeah, it's more about, and the point here was, get away from, we're just doing things here and they're doing it wrong. It's another location, it's another country. But so both about what is actually the difference between the different cultures, but also how do we work together? How do we do our daily work? How do we understand the way we are doing things? Because that creates a working culture where the local country culture does not prevent us working together. That's important here. It's not about we're doing things right here and they're doing it wrong because in this other country. So we need to have a shared working culture where it's much more transparent how we do work and be aware of the differences and the similarities between the different cultures. I've been using culture experts based on what kind of teams, so be aware of the culture in India or in Bangladesh or in Pakistan or in Ukraine. To teach the teams, to know what is it to be to work in India or in Denmark. It's not just one way; it's both ways. Was that enough answer to the question? I guess so.
All right, we'll take last one. It's about the global gardener role. Is the role of the gardener just as much to remind the teams that they are distributed and they need to utilize all the resources on the team as it is to provide them with specific tools for working through or across the distribution?
Well, I've seen this working well if this global gardener is not part of a team, but it's more someone who is actually been able to work across teams, across the organization. If this is someone inside a specific team, well, maybe this is a small organization, then the balance between what do we need to do right now, very short term, compared to what do we need to do to move the whole structure forward, can be very difficult. So I've seen it working well if this is not inside the team, but actually outside the team. And most often it's working even better if it's from a person who got some management role that actually can initiate different changes across organizations.
So, thank you, Mads.
Thank you, and I hope I have given you some ideas to use it. Thank you.